Hi, this is Shauna, the CEO and founder of Fuel Talent. One of the things I have loved most in my 25-year recruiting career has always been the stories that people tell. Stories of leadership, career choices, company ideas, and team building. My inspiration for starting the What Fuels You podcast came from being curious about people's lives and wanting to help share their stories. What path brought them to this place? What decisions did they make that led to failures and successes? Who influenced those decisions, and what lessons were learned along the way? I hope you enjoy the What Fuels You podcast. Today's guest on the What Fuels You podcast is Matthew Marx. Matthew is CEO and co-founder of Evocalize, developers of the Evocalize collaborative marketing platform. Evocalize technology connects businesses to execute marketing programs together that are not possible on their own. Matt has spent over 20 years at the intersection of marketing and technology and has a particular passion for using technology to make great marketing simple. Prior to founding Evocalize, Matt worked on the senior leadership team for Austin-based marketing technology company Bazaarvoice, the London-based strategy and consultancy PA Consulting Group, and on Oracle Retail Software Group. Matt has helped set advertising standards with the Interactive Advertising Bureau in New York and has an MBA from Babson College in Wellesley, Massachusetts. Welcome, Matt. So good to see you.
Hey, Shauna. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Okay. So I know that you told me when we caught up that you have heard the podcast. So, we start with rapid fire. All right, ready? What is your favorite outdoor activity?
Hiking, backpacking.
And what's the best region, in your opinion, for good wine?
Walla Walla.
Oh, interesting.
I'm gonna
What
stick
kind of
with
wine?
local Washington.
What wine do you like from Walla Walla?
Oh gosh, everything. I've just grown. Since we've lived in Washington. We lived in Washington for the past 10 years. We've just grown super excited about Washington wines, and that area is we just have kind of developed a taste for it.
I've gone wine tasting there. Have you gone to Gramercy?
I have. It's fantastic.
I have to give a plug because those are our good friends. So this is to Pam and Greg at Gramercy. Okay, who is, in your opinion, the best college football team?
Texas A&M University, Giga-Maggies.
Yeah.
Should have been in the playoffs last year, by the way, to all the college football fans out there.
Yeah, I'm sure. If you could be a famous athlete, which sport would you choose?
Football.
Oh,
I'm a
did you play
Texan.
football?
I'm a native Texan, so you can't break too far from your roots.
And did you play football growing up?
I played as a kid growing up, but I was a swimmer in high school and in college, which I was better at than football. But
I didn't know you were so college athlete at A&M.
Yeah, I swam some at A&M, and I was a high school swimmer in the state of Texas, and was a better high school swimmer than a college swimmer.
I get it.
But I wasn't good. I wasn't good enough to play football, which was kind of my first love.
Swimming, I think, is safer. What are the three most important traits that you hope to pass down to your kids?
It's a great question.
It's not really rapid fire, but I'm trying to sneak it in.
You know what? Hard work. So we're kind of on a break from in-person school where my kids are going to school right now, and so my son is in the office around the corner, my 11-year-old son, and I tell him every day, hard work, right? So to me, hard work is a secret to everything. If you're not willing to work hard, it doesn't matter how smart you are, you're not going to win. So hard work, perseverance, and respect are probably the three that I would, in rapid fire fashion, tell my kids that I hope they have.
I like those. I like this. Okay, water or mountains? That's a tough one, especially now that I know you're a swimmer.
Mountains. I just finished a 50-mile hike in the Goat Rocks Wilderness up in Washington. It was rad. We love the mountains.
You're so hardcore. I kind of had a sense, but I didn't realize 50 miles.
That's so fun. It's just
insane.
Like you get far enough in there, you can get away from people even today. Did you
get blisters? And who'd you do it with?
I have a kind of a group of kind of fellow business leaders in the area that in Washington, friends, really good buddies that we go every year, and there are kind of 8 of us or 10 of us that will go, but in any given trip, it's probably 3, 4, 5. So I went on this trip with a buddy of mine he's actually at a company called Second Watch. They're a local Seattle company that we went and did the Go Rocks trip.
Wow, very impressive. So you started saying, I know you're a native Texan. How do you define yourself? Like, what does that mean to you? I know that it's like a strong culture in that state.
Yeah, I've traveled a lot. So I went to business school in Boston. I've lived in Seattle for 8 years, and so I've bounced around quite a bit. So I probably don't have. Maybe you can pick up a little bit of an accent, but
I haven't heard it. I don't hear it at all.
No. Someone said I hear your Texas accent the other day, and I was surprised by that. So, this state of Texas has a very strong culture, and to some it's super motivating, and to others it's not. And I'm kind of in the middle. I love some things about Texas, and they have a lot of pride. That Texans have a ton of pride, and that's kind of neat. To have a sense of community through pride, and and there's some other things that I could kind of leave. So, but I think about that. The Republic of Texas and the independence movement, and growing up as a kid going to school in Texas, you pledge allegiance to the Texas flag alongside every morning, and you sing the Texas state anthem, right? And so these are just like core and built into the fabric of growing up, as a kid.
Are your parents Texans, like born and raised?
No, we moved in. So I was kind of the first to be. I'm the only child in our family to be born in Texas. So I'm the only native one.
And how many kids are there in the family? Where are you in the birth order?
Yeah, I'm the youngest. There are 4 of us. So,
you're the baby.
I'm the baby. Not so much of a baby with this gray beard, but yeah.
And your parents, like, what took them there? What did they do growing up? What was that whole childhood upbringing like?
Well, we, as a kid, I grew up in I grew up in Pittsburgh, kind of up until elementary age, Pennsylvania. And my dad was in the oil and steel business, and so he moved us around from. They grew up in Cincinnati. My dad was a professional baseball player for a number of years, and then went into the oil and steel business, and that was pretty big in those days. And then Houston was obviously a big energy and oil town in the early 80s, was kind of booming. And so they moved us down to Houston, and that was, I pictured coming as a little kid, pre-elementary school, I pictured like huge vistas and horses everywhere, and, like cliffs,
cowboys.
Cactus, and then you get into Houston and it's like a suburb, and they're, it was super different.
Yeah. I pictured Dallas.
Yeah.
Like
right?
Like the show.
Yeah.
Like the TV show, Joan Collins and the big hair. And that's amazing. And so did you go to public school or private school? Were you like a good student? Public. And I was a very mediocre student. Very mediocre, but you got into A&M, which I don't know how it is getting in there as a local, but I had a friend that got in there, and it's hard to get in from out of state.
Yeah. It was, I lucked out. Those days they were still I don't know if they still do, but in those days they were taking test scores. And so I lucked out on the test score, exception front. And probably, all 3 of my siblings had already gone there or were going there. So that'll become a legacy, family legacy allegiance thing probably helped me. But I kind of snuck in. I was genetics undergrad. So they were the number 1 school for genetics when I was going to school, and so we went there, and I ended up in something very different than genetics, obviously. But
how did you? What did you go there for? So you went there for genetics, thinking you might pursue medicine or biotech, or I feel like that's like ahead of its time. I feel like genetics keeps coming up in the last 20 years or 15 years.
Yeah. My team makes fun of me all the time, actually, because I told this story of how I went to school one day, over beers, and it kind of made its way around the company. So I got picked on just a couple weeks ago on it. So I had this dream as a kid, as a high school kid, that I think going into college, that like, if you could genetically engineer cactus and broccoli, like you could plant fields of broccoli cactus in the desert in Africa and feed the continent. And so like, that was kind of my like naive, childhood aspiration coming out of high school and going to college. And so that's really why I did what I did. And, turns out I'm in software today. So, I
Yeah.
it wasn't as easy as I thought, and I wasn't as good as I thought I could be.
Yeah. Did you get recruited out of A&M for your first job out of college, or did you go right in to get your MBA? Like I'm curious how you made that decision even to get an MBA.
Yeah, it's a great question. No, I was actually a non-traditional MBA, and then I was a little bit later in my career. I actually left school for a year in the middle of my A&M career. I got into tech, software development, stuff like that in the early days of web. That was kind of pre.com, early .com era.
Like floppy disks. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm just teasing you.
Floppies. They were the ENIAC and EDVAC, room-sized computers. So I went and worked for a year, and then I was kind of a tech guy from then on. Out of A&M, I was a software engineer, out of undergrad, I was a software engineer for a little while, and then realized I was only a mediocre software engineer. I was better at kind of determining what products to build and like what functionality. And it turns out that was a product manager's job, which I didn't even know existed.
Well, it looks like you've done it all. I mean, literally, you're like a little Swiss Army knife. You did a little programming and coding, little product, little sales. And did I read this right, that you also had a little stint in investment banking and consulting, or did I read that wrong? Like, where'd that whole thing fit into your world?
Out of business school. So I went to business school after 7 or 8 years of working in tech, running some pretty big, couple $100 million projects as a kind of product director deal in software. And then I went back. I went to Babson College, as you know, and up in New England, because I just love the entrepreneurship side of that. And then coming out of that, I thought, I want to go into strategy consulting and that deal. So I worked for a firm, it's the largest strategy firm in London, and bounced back and forth between kind of New York and Boston. And we lived in Boston and had our kids up there. So anyway, I've done a lot of different things. My one thing that I like to tell people is, like, sometimes you kind of have to bounce around a little while to figure out what you love. And then when you figure out what you love, you get decent at it, because you do what you love more than you do what you don't love. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like, so you're going to get good at whatever you work, whatever you like to do and work a lot at.
Those are good words of advice also for our kids. Cause I feel like the kids today have so much pressure to like figure it all out. And it's such a pressure cooker. It's ridiculous. It's like, I got lucky. I mean, I've been doing this since I was 22. And so 27 years, I will say my age, it's fine. And I just feel like it's so random that I fell into something that feels so natural and that I love. But yeah, I know that it's not common. I also know that getting that foundation, whether it's 7 years after college or later, of an MBA plus investment banking and consulting, I feel like is like kind of the unicorn triple whammy for you as a CEO. You've kind of so well-rounded.
Well, thanks. I'd love to tell people that. No, frankly, it's interesting, Shauna, because you're less suited for a specific role. Like, I can sell, I'm not a CRO. I can run product. That's probably the closest thing you have. I can run engineering. Because I've done a lot of those different things, but the CEO is, certainly at our scale, and who knows at a larger scale, but like at our scale and a little bit larger, you're doing so many different things all the time that knowing a little bit about it, having done the job for a little while, helps, So we talk with investors, and I bring up my kind of experience as an LP, the folks who invest in the venture capitalists who then invest in us, and all that stuff, I think, helps understand perspective a little bit. And so, like to your point, you tell the kids, right, like figure it out. Well, it took me a decade to get back to like software, which is really what, I think my kind of calling is. And so, Yeah, sometimes it just takes a while,
Yeah.
but
And
sometimes it works out.
which of these roles kind of, you've worked at some really cool companies along the way. We mentioned some of them in your intro, have kind of prepared you most for your current gig, Evocalize, founder and CEO.
Mm.
And also which of those companies had the culture you would most want to emulate?
You know what? I have to give props to Brant Barton and Brett Hurd, who were the founders of my last company, where I was on the senior leadership team at Bazaarvoice down in Austin. Those guys, like, they just are fantastic culture people, and built a machine. Built an organization that that had a greater purpose and a greater calling, and that was kind of to democratize people's voices or consumers' voices, so that when you bought a product or used a service, you weren't just hearing from the brand or the manufacturer, you were also hearing from the people who used the product, and that commonly was manifested in the product rating and review, which before them was limited to Amazon and a couple other little sites across the web. Now you see that everywhere you go, because they built a platform to make it easy to do that in a safe and kind of moderated way that was also trustworthy. And like, they built a platform within their company, not tech, but the company's platform that that was meaningful, and people wanted to support that. And so when you hired, you hired high performing, like-minded people who wanted to, kind of be a part of something bigger. And so I learned a lot from that. And then I helped in a modest way, but these guys grew the company. We took it public in 2012, and that whole journey was pretty phenomenal from a learning perspective too. Even having been through a lot of other things and a lot of different roles and doing different jobs, watching that and helping through that process was pretty neat.
Mm-hmm. And so, what brought you to Seattle? Was that to start Evocalize?
Yeah, we actually incubated. So we took the last company I was mentioning, Bazaarvoice, through the IPO process. And then 6 months later, to me, it was already 1,200 people. And it was a little too big for me at that point. So I broke off and started experimenting with what today became Evocalize. And I did that in Austin, actually, because Bazaarvoice is based in Austin. And so we incubated in the Austin Technology Incubator, which is associated with UT. Which to me as an Aggie was a little salt, but they run a great program over there. So we started there, just experimented, and then our seed round, we had term sheets from a number of firms and cities across the country, in Austin, in New York, in Chicago, and in Seattle. And we thought that Madrona Ventures in Seattle, best place for us to basically get going.
Yeah. So how did you choose? And if there were to be an entrepreneur listening who's trying to choose who to partner with as an investor, what was your vetting process?
Oh gosh. Well, I think, obviously you look at domain expertise and successes with similar companies. And I think that's super important. But I think the investor personality match is really important too. And Madrona kind of checks all the boxes if you're looking at funds, right? They have lots of successes. They're serious investors, but they also stick with you long term. And so I think that's all really important stuff when you're looking at investors.
Totally. And who at Madrona is the partner, and do they have a board seat, I'm assuming?
They do. Scott Jacobson has been a longtime partner. They've been fantastic. Madrona, all the entire team, certainly Scott. They've been patient investors as we kind of figured some things out in the early days.
Yeah.
And as an entrepreneur, that's like one of the most important things. Some folks push you so hard in the early days before you're ready before you really have product market fit to get out there, and that can be a tough thing, right? These guys are super, super patient
and methodical, it sounds like. Methodical. And so when you talk about product market fit, what was the original idea and product, and how has that changed or pivoted over time?
So we had the idea, right? So if you can kind of tie these together, you think about the story that I've just told and where I came from and how I started the company, right? But so if you think about customer voice and data, right? So if you think about if you think about people leaving opinions on products and services, right, through ratings and reviews and other things, there's a lot of like data signal you could pick up from that could power more kind of automated, intelligent marketing based on data. So we had this core philosophy when we started the company that there are a lot of people that now that in those days and still in marketing, and certainly paid marketing, which is kind of our area of focus, that is driven by these large advertising agencies, right? And the large advertising agencies hire teams and teams of people, lots of them right out of school, to press buttons all day long, to run marketing programs. And we thought that was kind of silly, right? And so if you think about, because machines can do a lot of that, and they can lift the humans up to a level above that, and the humans can set up kind of the construct, like the goals and what options the machine has, and the machine can do a lot of the work of figuring out how to drive ROI downstream, right? And so it can get a little pedantic, but we started out gathering a lot of that data that we needed to run the machine through surveying techniques and other things, and then building models based on that, and then automating the process of running marketing. And we did this we started out in real estate. We did it for large real estate portals, if you know all the names for, and we're pretty successful at it. But what we learned early on is we didn't actually have to do any of the data gathering, or a lot of the data gathering itself, because they were already data gathering, right? The data already existed. And so it was kind of like an unnecessary piece. So 3 or 4 years ago, we wrapped that up and sold it to another tech company, that piece, and put that money back in the company. And that's helped us accelerate.
Oh, interesting. And so the we that you're talking about, do you have co-founders? And if so, I'm always curious about this. Is it like, hey, I like the people, and then we're going to go find the idea, or we have the idea and then we pitch it to the people? Like, what was the order and kind of birth story of these relationships?
Yeah. So my co-founder came out of our last company, Bazaarvoice, together. He was our CTO there. And I think, going through this startup process. And so I think we want to go do a startup together thing happened. And we have this core thesis of data-driven marketing being kind of the future that really wasn't there, except for a couple of use cases in those days. And so that definitely happened that way for us. I think, though, through the course of that, you have kind of differing viewpoints sometimes, and where the company should go and what it should do. And so my co-founder isn't in the company anymore. 4 or 5 years ago, just a couple years in to our journey, he broke off and went to do other things. And we that's when we kind of took up that piece of tech and sold it, and used that to invest in the company. So we didn't need to go take another funding round. In those days, that sale kind of fueled us for some time.
Yeah, I like it. Nice plug for the fuel.
I like it. Yeah.
It fueled it. So you talked about funding. You did the seed round with Madrona. And how much have you raised so far, and where are you in the funding process?
So we've raised about $5 million in seed capital to date through Madrona and Second Century Ventures, which is the venture capital arm of the National Association of Realtors. Because again, we started in real estate and have kind of used that as our beachhead to expand. And so they've been great partners. We also have Habanero Ventures to fund out of Arizona. That's does a lot of commercial real estate investing and other things. And so. So we've raised a fairly modest amount of money to date. Now, frankly, I don't want to get into all the details, but we're now at a stage where it's time to pour fuel on the engine. And so, as you know, I think we talked about this in scheduling this. We're in conversations with investors now on the kind of our next round and next stage to go even faster. We've been fortunate enough to have great clients, and we've been making meaningful revenue. We're profitable we can be profitable for a long time and putting that money in the bank as a company. So we're fortunate enough to have great customers that pay and believe in our product enough to pay, and that's helped us not have to raise until now. But now, you raise in advance of revenue, right? So you go, okay, I can see the future. And we've booked, quite a bit of sales in the first half of the year, for instance. And so you're like, okay, well, you do a cost benefit trade-off. I think people get into this train where they just raise to raise because that's the thing to do.
Totally.
And to me,
and it also
raise
seems
for a
like
purpose.
it's fear-based. It feels like it's fear-based. Like, well, what if we just don't have the money? I better have it. And I'm like, well, you're diluting and diluting and diluting. And what are you doing with the money?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, and I think it's ego-based too, to some degree. And so you feel that in my position, right? So you look at, okay, you go out and raise $50 million or $100 million. That's great if you like feel like you can actually use that, and get a 10x return on that the next few years. But like, the other side of that is that doesn't work out sometimes, right?
And it's also like, how about we build a profitable company instead?
That's right. So at least build a profitable company until we know we have really high conviction that when we put $1 in, we get 5 out, right?
Yeah, and so we have proof of concept. We have repeat customers. We have like less turnover. Just like it's a smoother thing.
Yeah. So that's a decision we made a little earlier this year, and so we're pretty deep in that process now. But it's a press the pedal kind of a moment for us, as you know, working with us a little bit as well.
Yeah, it's super exciting. And so, speaking of recruiting, how have you thought about it? Like, what's your strategy? And have you put some thought and effort into creating a diverse and inclusive environment?
Yeah, to use you guys more, I think. I don't know, this is our strategy, hire experts. No, I mean, I think we're kind of at that stage now, right, where we doubled this year our staff already, and we'll double to triple next year. So you're kind of in that stage of we've used mostly external folks, including you guys, to help us bring on the strategic kind of leadership roles and key roles to date. And I'm proud to say, I think we're just somewhere right about 50% on our leadership team, women and men. So the gender diversity and split is there are some fantastic women leaders, powerful women leaders that folks throughout our company can kind of learn from and be guided from. And we're still working on kind of the more
diversity.
More diversity. It's it's a challenge for a small growing company, right? Because you don't have time sometimes to wait, right? And so you have to fill a role or you can't grow. And so that's the balance we have right now. And we've made an effort. We certainly have some ethnic diversity, but we're working on it. It's a challenge that we continue to work on.
It's hard. I mean, we've been working on it really hard. We're starting to watch the metrics. And I think we're tracking at we're proud because we're doing about 35% of our placements, and we're tracking LGBTQ and BIPOC and vets, and it requires intention and it requires focus. I think it also is helpful to embrace this kind of potentially remote situation or hybrid. How are you guys looking at that through the pandemic and going back? Yeah,
so it's an interesting story. Like, we actually were one of the first, if not the first, companies to shut down in Seattle as the pandemic started. The end of February, I think the last week of February is when we closed our physical offices in 2000, and that was frankly just because I have my sister's a professor of epidemiology at Johns Hopkins, and so I bat phone called her, and it's just going to be a serious thing, and she said, "Yeah, like get ready." So we're comfortable working remotely, but I don't love it, right? I mean, I think the hybrid workforce is where we'd love to be longer term. We have some folks that are not that are outside of our core hubs of Seattle, obviously, is our headquarters, and then Austin. We have a growing office in Austin, Texas. I love for folks to be able to come in one day a week, or to come in more if they'd like, but to come in one day a week if we can have them close enough, because I just think the culture of being around your colleagues.
We've been doing it lately, one day, maybe 2 days a week. And I cannot tell you how much more we're getting done as far as the collaboration stuff, or just the quick, like, turn your head and ask a quick question. It is a thing, but from a recruiting standpoint, and back to the diversity and inclusion thing, it does open up, obviously, a wider net to have more flexibility around like where the people are.
I think some of the roles that you were hiring for us, in fact, you mentioned to our head of client success, hey, you might open this up to a more, more fully remote nationwide process. So I'm with you. I mean, it's just figuring it out, right? Everything's evolving. It's a new world. I think if I have a preference, I'd have someone, again, be regionally based. So, even if you're, an hour outside of either Austin or Seattle, you can come in once a week and have lunch with the crew, and we can whiteboard a little bit.
Totally.
We can talk about strategy. But that's not always true. We have folks in South Carolina. We have folks, that spend months in other areas too, that are from, say, Seattle or Austin, and travel and spend. Our director of product spends summers in Spain.
Wow, I love it. And did you feel like you led well through the pandemic? I mean, I know we were all pressed to be, not just on and motivating and kind of reassuring, but also making good, smart business decisions, because we were all looking at our balance sheets and trying to figure out what what was happening. Yeah,
it's a great question. I don't know that I can ever say that I did well. It's like beaten into me, but and you and I were talking the other day about everything in your life bleeds together in these times, right? And kids are trying to go to school remote, and everyone knows the drill because we all lived through it. But I think it was pretty natural for us to transition. I mean, it just wasn't. Fortunately, we're in a world, right, where everything's in the cloud, right? We didn't have any on-premise. The only disadvantage was, again, the ability we lacked the ability to get on a whiteboard and just, we like each other. I mean,
totally.
The company kind of likes each other. And so you got a little lonely. But I think we did a pretty good job. You know what, frankly, the team, for me, our leadership team did an awesome job. Like, for me, I kind of planted the seed, but it was the hiring that made it all happen, because we brought people in that were not only great at their job, but they were great emotional leaders and very emotionally intelligent. And so, for instance, our head of client success is a great female leader. Would organize digital happy hours every week, like a bunch of folks did, right? And then our head of finance, another great female leader, and so you get the community really pulls together of leadership. And that's what I think powered more of it than me as the single head.
Yeah. And so it sounds like you hired some high EQ, but also kind of badass leaders. Are there attributes, if someone's listening and they want to apply and they want to work there, are there attributes that make somebody successful at Evocalize?
Obviously data orientation and proficiency with like detailed data. We're a data oriented company, but I'll say responsibility and the ability to work independently, the feeling of freedom and ownership and in the company and our mission and our future. Those are all things I think at a more of a behavioral level or meta level that make folks successful. The other thing is, our software is called collaborative marketing software, but really, like, that bleeds into our culture. The spirit of collaboration, because we won't stand for folks who don't. You just won't work at Evocalize if you're not willing to collaborate. The whole concept of kind of politics or not my job, or I can't work in that environment. So I'm not going to lead a company that has that environment. And so we're really open, direct, honest company culture, and that's pushed from the leadership, but it's also bottom up, right? It's the entire company working together. We vet for it very strongly in our recruiting process. And there's some super skilled folks that we've not proceeded with, or who have joined and haven't worked out, that had been solely because of the cultural aspects. That's, to me, culture, that old, I think it's Peter Drucker quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast, probably overused, but like, I believe in that to my core. If you don't have the culture, like you can't do anything, because your strategy can change.
I totally agree. So yeah, you've been knee deep in it. You've got your kids, you're kind of doing the I guess we're not coming bi-coastal. We're doing the Texas, Seattle thing. You're climbing crazy hikes for 50 miles. You're doing all sorts of badass things. How do you balance it all? Like, what do you do to set yourself up for a good day or a good week? Or does it change every day?
Well, I do a couple little things. They're not like, they're not super spectacular, but every day I do two things. I have coffee with my wife when I'm in town with my wife, which it's just something that like kind of level sets the day in the morning. And every other day it's a trade-off. And sometimes it's a not my day, your day. You're just getting out of bed first. And then, so that's one. And then the more practical one I think is I try to write two things down every morning in my notebook before I log into my computer that I need to get accomplished that day, and not from a results perspective, but from an actions or activities perspective. Like, what do I need to do that day? So maybe it's, in the sales context, maybe it's make, 10 key calls or 5 key calls, so it's not about winning the deal. It's about the action or the process to get the
momentum
to get the momentum that leads to whatever it is at the end of the day.
Yeah. Is that mixed in with some personal, or is it all just your notes are just around your business?
It's mostly business. Yeah.
Mostly business. Yeah.
The personal stuff stays on off the
a different notebook.
The written notebook. Yeah.
Are there things that people, who are listening, or maybe some old friend from Texas is going to randomly listen to this? Are there things that anybody would be surprised to learn about you? I mean, I've learned a few things that I just didn't know.
I don't know. I'm this weird mix of like geeky tech and like old school Texas, right? And so I love tractors. So that's something that people always laugh at. Even in Texas, in tech firms, people laugh at. I love tractors, old tractors. I like digging holes with tractors. I like planting trees. Like, I just like doing physical, getting your hands with
dirty.
Machines. And getting into the. In fact, so last night I ran outside and we had some stuff being delivered, and the trees kind of had grown over in the new house that we're in, as you know, Shauna. And so I ran out and I took a chainsaw and I got a ladder and I just started like chainsawing, cutting limbs on the tree. And it was so satisfying to trim the tree up and cut them up. And anyway, it was just, so I love that kind of outdoor work with your hands kind of stuff.
Yeah. And do you like to have goals around your physicality, like this 50-mile thing? Is there like always something kind of on the calendar to look forward to keep you focused? Or is it like a buddy will call and be like, hey, you want to go do this? And you're like, sure. And you're in a good enough shape to go do it.
The longer hikes. So my buddies and I try and do one long for the last 6 or 7, 8 years. Every summer we've done one long hike, right? Which is like, for us, there are people who do, way, way harder stuff than we do. But for us, a 40 to a 60 mile trip, which is kind of our sweet spot, somewhere in there every summer, whether it's Olympics or the Cascades or North Cascades or, Goat Rocks or in another state. It takes prep for me. Right. I can't just hop out of bed in my mid 40s and do that. So I try to, set up a regimen every morning. I'll do an hour and a half, and then you progressively make it a little harder. And then by the end of the day, I'm that like weirdo with the full packed backpack with full weight on it, walking everywhere, including
we've done a weighted vest. Do you have a weighted vest? Those are the best.
I'm old school because, otherwise I've found that if you don't practice with the shoulder straps and the waist belt and the whole deal, like your support muscles don't strengthen alongside of everything else.
Yeah. And so do you listen to music, books on tape, podcasts? What do you do to pass that hour and a half?
I listen to music sometimes, but I'll tell you, if I really like listening to, again, my hobby is college football. You opened kind of up the session with college football, which was super. I mean, it's no wonder you're so good at what you do. Getting to the core of my hobbies, right? Like college football is a huge hobby of mine. And so it's an escape for me. And so I like to listen to different college football different college football podcasts, some from my school for Texas A&M and then for other schools and kind of other things. And to me, that's probably what I do most.
That's super fun. I love it. Okay. So my ultimate question always is, what fuels you?
I think the core of what fuels me is achievement. And it's the need to achieve and to do something that you're proud of at the end of the day, that you can look back and say later on in life, I feel good about that. Right. Mm-hmm. And you talked about what do you with the kids, what do you push with the kids? And to me, it's perseverance and that hard work that I talked about. It's not always going to be rosy. Right. So to me, achievement takes focus, hard work, and perseverance, and getting through the hard times.
Thank you for listening to the What Fuels You podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, and follow us on social media to keep up with the latest news and episodes. You can also contact us at podcast@fueltalent.com to provide feedback, ask questions, and share topics or guests you would like us to cover in the future. We hope you feel inspired by our guests and that we have helped fuel your day. Join us next time for another episode of What Fuels You.